The east flank died in silence. 37 soldiers. Not one radio transmission. Not one distress call. Just the abrupt cessation of gunfire and the hollow static where voices should have been. Captain James Thornton presses back against the frozen dirt wall of the communication trench and forced himself to breathe. His breath crystallized in the air. Tiny ice crystals catching the faint light from a flare dying somewhere over the ridge. The temperature had dropped to minus 18 Celsius. The blizzard had been hammering their position for 6 hours. And now this. Say again, watchtower. Confirm east flank status. Static. Thornton closed his eyes. 3 kilometers of defensive line. Gone in 40 minutes. The ambush had been surgical. Too surgical. The first mortar rounds had landed directly on their ammunition depot. Coordinates that weren't supposed to exist outside of battalion command. The second wave had severed their primary communication lines with pinpoint accuracy. The third had collapsed the eastern trenches before anyone could organize a counterattack. Someone had fed the enemy their entire defensive playbook. Captain. Sergeant Morrison slid into the trench beside him, snow caking his field jacket, his face a mask of controlled terror. Major Henderson's down. Took shrapnel to the chest. Medic's doing what he can, but how bad? Bad enough that you're in command now, sir. Thornton absorbed this information like another round to the chest. Henderson, the old man, had survived 3 deployments, 2 IED strikes, and a helicopter crash in the Korengal. Now he was bleeding out in a frozen trench because someone in their own chain of command had sold their positions. Ammunition count. Morrison's jaw tightened. 11 rounds between us, sir. Started with 200 this morning. 11 rounds. 19 survivors. And somewhere out there in the white hell of the blizzard, an enemy force that knew exactly where they were hiding. Thornton pulled out his tactical map, already knowing it was useless. Rally Point Zulu was 6 kilometers through enemy-controlled territory. Their extraction window had closed 2 hours ago. No air support in these conditions. No QRF within range. They were dead. They just hadn't accepted it yet. If that opening hooked you, buckle up. This story only gets more intense. Subscribe now for more real stories of courage, and hit that notification bell. Now, let me take you back to what happened next in that frozen hell. There's nothing left, Morrison said quietly. Every frequency's either jammed or dead. We've tried battalion. We've tried the FOB. We've tried emergency channels. Nobody's answering. Thornton stared at his radio. Standard military issue. Capable of reaching any authorized frequency within a 100-kilometer radius. Useless if everyone on the other end was either compromised or complicit. But there was one frequency that wasn't standard. His hand moved the dial before his brain fully processed what he was doing. The numbers were burned into his memory from a classified briefing 3 years ago. A briefing that had ended with his commanding officer saying, "This channel no longer exists. These call signs are dead. Forget you ever heard them. The forward recon frequency. Sealed after the Calvic operation." Sir, Morrison watched him with growing confusion. What frequency is that? I don't recognize. One that doesn't exist. Thornton's fingers found the numbers. 147.325. The ghost channel. One that got an entire recon team killed 6 years ago. He keyed the transmitter. Echo 7. This is Bravo Actual. Position overrun. 19 survivors. No ammunition. No extraction. If anyone is monitoring this frequency, he paused, knowing how insane the next word would sound. If anyone is still out there, we need immediate assistance. Please respond. Static. Morrison shook his head slowly. Sir, that frequency's been dead for years. Whoever was on the other end of that call sign is gone. Command sealed it themselves. I know what command did. Then why? The static shifted. Both men froze. The sound was subtle. A change in texture, a softening of the white noise that suggested something had engaged on the other end. Thornton's heart slammed against his ribs. Then she spoke. Bravo Actual, this is Echo 7. The voice was female. Low, calm, cold as the winter that was killing them. Who needs me? Thornton exchanged a look with Morrison. The sergeant's face had gone pale. Echo 7. Say again your status. We were informed this frequency was decommissioned. We were informed. You were informed I was dead. The voice cut through his words without emotion. Command declared me Kia after Calvic. Easier than explaining what they did to my team. But I'm not dead. Bravo actual. I'm 7 clicks north of your position, and I've had eyes on your sector for the last 4 hours. Thornton's hand trembled around the radio. 7 kilometers. She had been watching them die from 7 kilometers away. If you've been monitoring, why didn't you? Because I don't work for command anymore. I stopped working for the people who kill their own soldiers a long time ago. A pause. Wind howled through the transmission. But you call the old frequency, the one they tried to bury, the one only real recon operators know exists. That tells me you're not one of them. That tells me you're just a soldier trying to keep his people alive. Thornton found his voice. 19 survivors. No ammunition. Enemy forces closing on our position. Major Henderson's critical. We have no way out. I know. Another pause. I'm looking at your position through thermal right now. 19 heat signatures, clustered in the Western Trench Network. Enemy forces massing for final assault approximately 1,400 meters east. You have maybe 14 minutes before they complete encirclement. Can you help us? Silence stretched across the frozen distance between them. When Elena Navarro finally answered, her voice carried a weight that Thornton couldn't quite identify. Not anger, not grief, something older, something that had learned to live in the cold. I shouldn't. The smart thing would be to let you die the same way my team died. Let command explain another lost company. Let them bury another truth. She exhaled slowly. But you're not command. You're 19 soldiers who had nothing to do with what happened to me. And I can't watch that again. I won't. Echo 7. Shut up and listen, Captain. Your extraction orders, Rally Point Zulu. You received them through official channels, correct? Affirmative. Don't go there. Thornton felt ice form in his stomach that had nothing to do with the temperature. Say again, Echo 7. Rally Point Zulu is our designated extraction. Rally Point Zulu is a kill zone. The words came flat and final. 6 kilometers through enemy territory to a position that's been pre-registered for artillery. Same playbook they use on my team at Calvic. You walk your survivors into that valley. You won't walk out. Morrison grabbed Thornton's arm. Sir, she's talking about insubordination. If we ignore direct extraction orders, if you follow those orders, you die. Elena's voice carried no emotion, no urgency, just the cold mathematics of survival. I've been watching command's patterns for 6 years. When they sacrifice a unit to cover their failures, they always use the same method. Official extraction to an exposed position. Delayed QRF response. After action, report blaming commander error. Sound familiar? Thornton thought of the suspiciously precise mortar strikes. The coordinates that shouldn't have leaked. The communications failure that happened at exactly the wrong moment. The ambush, he said slowly. Someone fed them our positions. Someone always feeds them your positions when command needs a scapegoat. Your company took the blame for a strategic failure 3 echelons above your pay grade. Now you're supposed to die completing an extraction that was never meant to succeed. Elena paused. I watched it happen to my own unit. I held my position for 18 hours while command called an artillery on our evac route. 47 enemy dead before I ran out of ammunition. 3 teammates dead because someone decided our sacrifice was more valuable than our survival. Jesus Christ. No, just war. Another pause. The wind screamed through the transmission. But I'm giving you a choice they didn't give me. There's an unauthorized landing zone 3 clicks north of your position, outside command's network. I've been watching it for 2 years. The enemy doesn't know it exists. You move now, you move quiet, and you trust my overwatch. I can get you there. Morrison shook his head violently. Sir, this is insane. We're supposed to trust a dead woman over our own chain of command? For all we know, she's the one who... She's not. Thornton surprised himself with the certainty in his voice. The enemy knew our exact defensive positions. They knew our ammunition depot coordinates. They knew our communication protocols. But they don't know about this frequency. They don't know she exists. If she were working with them, she wouldn't be offering us a way out. Smart man. Elena's voice carried something that might have been approval. Now move faster. You've got 12 minutes before that encirclement completes. Thornton made his decision. All units, rally on my position. We're moving north. Morrison, get Henderson on a litter. If he can't walk, we carry him. Sir, Command sent us to die. I'm choosing to live. He keyed the radio. Echo 7, we're preparing to move. What we need to know. First, I need to clear your path. There was a sound on her end, the quiet, mechanical precision of a bolt action engaging. Your sector has enemy sniper coverage. Two-man team, positioned in the tree-line 400 meters northeast. They've been tracking your position for the last hour. When your men move, they'll have clear shots on the first 6 soldiers through the trench exit. Can you neutralize? I'm already adjusted. Another pause. 700 meters. 15-knot crosswind. Snow obscuring my sight picture. Survivable conditions. When she spoke again, there was something ancient in her voice. Something that had made peace with death a long time ago. On my signal, your first squad moves. Not before. If anyone breaks cover before I fire, they die. Understood. Understood. Good. 30 seconds. Thornton gathered his surviving soldiers in the deepest section of the trench. 19 faces looked back at him, frostbitten, exhausted, terrified. Most of them were under 25. Most of them had never seen combat this intense. Now they were being asked to trust their lives to a voice on a dead frequency. Listen to me, he said quietly. Our extraction orders were compromised. Rally Point Zulu is a trap. We're going north instead. 3 kilometers to an unauthorized LZ. We have overwatch from a friendly sniper who's going to clear our path. When she gives the signal, we move. No hesitation. No second guessing. You follow her instructions like they're coming from God himself. Questions? A young private raised a shaking hand. Sir, who is she? Thornton looked at his radio. He thought of the flat, cold voice. The 6 years of isolation. The 47 confirmed kills in a single engagement. She's Echo 7, he said. And right now, she's the only reason we're still alive. The radio crackled. Bravo actual, target acquired. First shooter, Treeline, seated against the 3rd pine from the ridge. Second shooter, prone position, 12 meters west. On my count of 3, your first element moves. Not before. Copy, Echo 7. 1. Every soldier in the trench held their breath. 2. Thornton positioned himself at the head of the column. Morrison had Henderson on a makeshift stretcher. 3 soldiers supporting the weight. The major was unconscious now, his breathing shallow and rapid. 3. 700 meters away, in a direction no one could see, Elena Navarro pulled the trigger. The suppressed report barely carried through the blizzard. But through his binoculars, Thornton saw a dark shape slump against a tree in the distant tree line. 1 second later, a second figure jerked sideways and collapsed into the snow. 2 shots, 2 kills, separated by less than a heartbeat. Sniper team neutralized. Path is clear to the first checkpoint. Move now, bearing 35 degrees. You have a 40-meter corridor to work with. Drift left or right, you enter their kill zone. Stay in the corridor. I'm covering your 6. Thornton led his men into the storm. The wind hit them like a physical force, driving snow into their eyes, numbing exposed skin within seconds. Visibility dropped to maybe 30 meters. Enough to see the soldier ahead of you, not enough to see what was waiting in the dark. But Elena could see. Contact left, 200 meters. 4-man patrol, heading southeast. They haven't spotted you yet. Freeze movement. 19 soldiers became statues in the snow. Patrol passing. Heading away from your position. Resume movement in 5, 4, 3, 2 move. They moved through the frozen darkness like ghosts, guided by a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Elena's directions were precise. Bearing adjustments measured in single degrees. Distance call-outs accurate to the meter. Threat assessments that saw through blizzard and darkness alike. Contact front, 150 meters. Stationary observation post. 2 soldiers. Thermal signatures suggesting heavy weapons emplacement. Route around will cost you 6 minutes and put you in open ground. Alternative. I engage. You sprint through their position before reinforcements arrive. Your call, Bravo Actual. Thornton made the calculation. 6 minutes in open ground versus a 30-second sprint through chaos. Engage. Copy. On my mark, move directly toward my fire. 3, 2, 1. The night erupted. Even 700 meters away, even through the blizzard, Thornton could hear the distinctive crack of Elena's rifle. 2 shots, impossibly fast. Then a third, followed by the muffled explosion of something. A fuel canister, ammunition cache, detonating in the enemy position. Threat eliminated. Move through. You have 90 seconds before their QRF responds. Thornton's soldiers sprinted through the remnants of the observation post. In the strobing light of the fire, he caught glimpses of what Elena had done. 2 enemy soldiers slumped over a PKM emplacement. A third sprawled against the burning wreckage of their supplies. 3 shots, 3 kills. Clear the position. Northwest bearing, 273 degrees. Next checkpoint is 800 meters. They ran. Morrison fell in beside Thornton, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Who the hell is she, Captain? I've never seen shooting like that. Through this storm, at those distances. She's a ghost. Ghosts don't answer radios. This one does. Thornton checked his tactical map. 800 meters to the next checkpoint. 2 kilometers to the unauthorized LZ. Maybe 20 minutes of movement if they pushed hard. She said Calvic. You remember what happened there. Morrison's face went pale even in the darkness. The forward recon massacre. Entire team wiped out when command called an artillery on their exfil route. Official report said it was a targeting error. Friendly fire incident. Official report was a lie. She survived. That's impossible. The after-action photos showed. She survived. Thornton's voice left no room for argument, and she spent the last 6 years alone in this territory, watching command repeat the same pattern, sacrificing units to cover strategic failures, erasing anyone who asks questions. Then why is she helping us? Thornton thought about the voice on the radio, the flat, cold certainty, the careful precision of a woman who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove, because someone has to. Elena's voice cut through the moment. Bravo Actual, halt movement. New threat bearing down on your position. Enemy patrol. Strength approximately 15, heading your direction from the southeast. ETA to intersection with your route. For minutes, they're following your tracks in the snow. 15 soldiers. 19 survivors. 11 round between them. Can you engage? Negative. Too many targets. Too spread out. Even if I dropped 3 before they found cover, the rest would scatter and flank your position. Different approach. There was a pause. The sound of Elena thinking, calculating, her voice utterly devoid of panic. There's a ravine 40 meters west of your position. Deep enough for concealment. Narrow enough that thermal won't penetrate. Get your people into it. Go cold. No movement. No radio traffic. No heat generation. I'll draw them away. Draw them how? By giving them something more interesting to shoot at. Thornton felt his stomach drop. Echo 7, if you expose your position. I've been doing this for 6 years, Captain. Let me do my job. Her voice softened almost imperceptibly. Get your people safe. That's an order. You don't outrank me. I outrank everyone who's still pretending the chain of command matters. A pause. Ravine. Now, you have 3 minutes. Thornton led his soldiers into the ravine without further argument. The space was narrow, barely wide enough for 4 men abreast, but deep, carved into the frozen earth by centuries of spring runoff. They pressed themselves against the walls, minimizing their thermal signatures, their breath crystallizing in confined space. Above them, through the howling wind, Thornton heard Elena begin her work. The first shot came from the north, then the northeast, then the northwest. She was moving, he realized, firing from multiple positions, creating the impression of a larger force. Contact north. Enemy voices carried through the storm, distant, panicked, responding to a threat they couldn't locate. I see muzzle flash. Sniper on the ridge. Return fire. Suppressing fire. 12 o'clock. The enemy patrol opened up with everything they had. Assault rifles, machine guns, even what sounded like an RPG detonating against stones somewhere in the darkness. 30 seconds of chaos. 60 seconds. The sound moved north, away from the ravine, as the patrol pursued Elena's phantom positions. Then silence. Bravo actual. Elena's voice returned, calm as ever. Threat neutralized. 7 down, 8 scattered northwest into the woods. They'll regroup, but you got a window. Move now. Same bearing as before. Thornton pulled his soldiers out of the ravine. In the distance, he could see fires burning where patrol had been, destroyed positions, abandoned equipment. The wreckage of a pursuit that found nothing but death. Echo 7. How many rounds you have left? A pause. Long enough to worry him. Enough. That's not an answer. It's the only answer that matters. Her voice hardened. Stop asking questions and start moving. You got 10 minutes to reach the LZ, and command is going to realize their trap failed very soon. When they do, they'll send everything they have to make sure there are no survivors, no witnesses, no testimony. Testimony about what? Elena was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, something had changed in her voice. Not softer, exactly. More human, as if she were finally allowing herself to remember something she had buried a long time ago. Kalvik wasn't an accident, Captain. Command knew the artillery coordinates would hit our position. They authorized a strike anyway. We were supposed to die covering their retreat from a failed offensive. 37 soldiers sacrificed to protect the general's reputation. She paused. I was supposed to die with them. When I didn't, they erased me instead. Changed the records. Declared me Kia. Made it so anything I said would be the testimony of a dead woman. Why didn't you come forward? I tried. Once. Got as far as a JAG officer who listened to my entire debrief, then walked me to a holding cell and told me I was being transferred to a psychiatric facility for combat-induced delusions. I escaped that night. Disappeared into the mountains. Never trusted command again. Thornton felt something cold settle in his chest. Not just the temperature. Something deeper. How do I know you're not? You don't. Elena's voice was flat. Truthful. You have no reason to trust me except that I'm the one trying to keep you alive while your own chain of command is trying to kill you. Believe whatever you want. Just keep moving. They moved. The next 40 minutes were a blur of frozen terrain, whispered commands, and Elena's voice cutting through the storm with guidance that seemed almost supernatural. She saw patrols before they crested ridgelines. She identified minefields from thermal variations in the snow. She directed them through a labyrinth of enemy positions with the precision of someone who had mapped every centimeter of this territory over 6 years of solitary warfare. Hold at the tree line. Enemy convoy passing, east to west. 3 vehicles, 2 BTRs, and what looks like a command truck. They're headed toward your old position. Someone finally noticed you're not there anymore. Thornton watched the convoy roll past through the trees, their headlights barely visible through the snow. 3 armored vehicles. 40 soldiers at minimum. All of them hunting for 19 survivors who should have been dead hours ago. They're going to find our tracks. They're going to find a lot of things. Elena's voice carried something that might have been dark humor. I left them a few surprises. Claymores at their likely approach routes. Enough to slow them down, create confusion. By you time, you mined our previous position? I mine everywhere command sends their sacrifices. Kalvik taught me to prepare for their patterns. A pause. Speaking of which, the convoy commander is going to figure out you're heading north. When he does, he'll redirect toward the LZ. You need to be airborne before that happens. What about you? Silence. Echo 7. What happens to you when we extract? More silence. Thornton felt his blood chill in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature. You're not coming with us. There's no room on that bird for ghosts. Elena's voice was matter-of-fact, accepting. Besides, I can't leave. Someone has to stay and make sure this doesn't happen again. Someone has to watch the patterns. Protect the soldiers command decides to sacrifice. She paused. That's been my mission for 6 years. It doesn't end because you get to live. We could testify. Tell command what you told us. Force an investigation. There won't be an investigation. Elena's words came with the weight of someone who had already walked this path. There will be a classified briefing where your testimony gets sealed. There will be psychological evaluations questioning your combat judgment. There will be a very quiet note in your file suggesting you experienced stress-induced battlefield delusions. And in 6 months, no one will remember you ever said my name. I won't let that happen. You won't have a choice. The system protects itself. A pause. But that's not why I'm helping you. I'm not helping you so you can tear down command or expose their crimes. I'm helping you because you're 19 soldiers who deserve to go home. That's enough. That's always enough. Thornton wanted to argue, wanted to promise her something, justice, recognition, a way out of the frozen hell she had built for herself. But he knew she wouldn't believe him. She had stopped believing in institutions a long time ago. Echo 7. Yeah. What's your real name? Another long pause. When she answered, her voice was softer than he had ever heard it. Elena Navarro, Sergeant, 3rd Recon Battalion. But that woman died at Kalvik. All that's left now is a call sign. Elena, he tested the name. Made it real. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You're still 800 meters from the LZ, and that convoy is going to figure out where you're going very soon. Her voice hardened again, professional, focused, lethal. Final push. Same bearing. I'm repositioning to provide overwatch on your approach route. When you hit the tree line, sprint for the clearing. Don't stop for anything. The extraction bird is inbound. ETA 16 minutes. 16 minutes. Copy. One more thing. Elena paused. If I go quiet during the approach, don't wait for me. Don't slow down. Don't try to help. Get your people on a helicopter and get out. Elena, I've been alone for 6 years, Captain. I know how to take care of myself. What I can't do is watch another unit die because they hesitated for my sake. Promise me. Thornton closed his eyes. I promise. Good. Now move. The final 800 meters felt like 800 miles. Elena's voice guided them through the last stretch of enemy-controlled territory, her directions growing more urgent as the convoy behind them began to close the gap. Thornton could hear them now. Engines revving in the distance, searchlights sweeping across the snow, the organized shouts of soldiers who had finally found the trail. Enemy patrol, 200 meters east. They're paralleling your movement. If they spot you before you reach the trees. Engaging. 2 shots. 2 bodies dropped into the snow. Clear. Keep moving. Enemy sniper team repositioning. 300 meters north. They're setting up to cover the LZ approach. Engaging. 1 shot. Then another. Clear. LZ is 100 meters ahead. I'm seeing headlights. The convoy is 2 minutes out. You need to sprint now. Thornton burst through the tree line and into the clearing. Behind him, his soldiers followed, stumbling, exhausted, carrying their wounded commander on a stretcher that had been rebuilt 3 times during the march. The clearing was small, maybe 50 meters across, and ringed by dense forest, perfect for a helicopter insertion, invisible from the main roads, and completely exposed as the convoy arrived before the bird. Inbound helicopter, bearing 090, ETA 30 seconds. Thornton heard it before he saw it. The distinctive thump of rotor blades cutting through the storm. A shape materialized in the blizzard, running lights flashing. A Black Hawk settling toward the clearing with urgent precision. All units, prepare for immediate extraction. Henderson first, then wounded, then everyone else. No delays. The helicopter touched down. The crew chief threw open the door. Get in. We've got 90 seconds before that convoy hits our position. Soldiers surged toward the bird. Morrison and 2 others heaved Henderson's stretcher through the door. The wounded followed. Then the rest, 19 survivors cramming into a space designed for 12, holding on to anything solid, praying the rotors wouldn't fail. Thornton was the last aboard. He turned, looking back toward the northern ridge where Elena had spent the last 3 hours saving their lives. Echo 7, we're on the bird. What's your position? Static. Elena, respond. We can wait. We can... Negative. Her voice cut through the transmission. Calm, controlled, utterly final. Convoy is 90 seconds from a clearing. 3 armored vehicles. Approximately 40 soldiers. If you're still on the ground when they arrive, you're all dead. Come with us. There's room. There's no room for me, Captain. There never was. A pause. The wind howled. But there is something you can do. When you get back, when they try to bury what happened here, tell them the truth. Tell them about Kalvik. Tell them about Rally Point Zulu. Tell them what command does to the soldiers they decide are expendable. Elena, my team didn't get to go home. Make sure their story does. Her voice softened. That's all I'm asking. Make sure it wasn't for nothing. Thornton's hand trembled on the doorframe. Every instinct screamed at him to wait, to order the helicopter to hold position while they extracted the woman who had saved all their lives. But he had made a promise. Lift off. Now. The crew chief hesitated. Sir, are you sure? I said now. The Black Hawk lurched skyward, through the open door. Thornton watched the clearing fall away, the tree line shrinking, the convoy's headlights appearing at the edge of the forest, soldiers pouring out of armored vehicles and firing blindly into the air. Echo 7, we're clear. What's your status? Elena's voice came back impossibly calm. I count 40 hostiles converging on my position. 3 BTRs, heavy weapon support. They know where I am now. A pause. Good. That means they're not following you. Elena, there has to be another way. There's always another way for people who have something left to lose. Her voice carried the weight of 6 years of solitude. 6 years of watching command repeat its patterns. 6 years of being dead to everyone she once served with. I don't, Captain. I haven't since Kalvik. But I can make sure those 40 soldiers spend the next hour chasing me instead of hunting your helicopter. You can't take on 40 soldiers alone. I took on 47 at Kalvik, held my position for 18 hours before I ran dry. A pause. I'm better now. The helicopter climbed through the storm. Below, Thornton saw muzzle flashes erupt in the tree line, the first exchange between Elena and her pursuers. Then more. Then a cascade of fire that lit up the night like a fever dream. Echo 7, give me a sitrep. Sitrep, I'm doing my job. Another pause, punctuated by the crack of her rifle. First BTR is closing on my position. External fuel tanks, visible from my angle. She laughed. A short, harsh sound that held no humor. Sloppy. What are you going to do? Something I've been waiting 6 years to do. The rifle cracked again. Make them regret hunting me. Thornton pressed his face against the helicopter's window, straining to see through the storm. The convoy was visible now. 3 dark shapes crawling up the mountainside, supported by waves of infantry spreading through the trees. And somewhere above them, invisible against the white hell of the blizzard, Elena Navarro prepared her final stand. Distance to first BTR, 800 meters. Wind holding at 15 knots. Snow reducing visibility to maybe 40%. Her voice was mechanical now. The clinical detachment of a sniper calculating a shot that should have been impossible. External fuel tank, right side, just above the rear axle. Puncture that, you get a slow leak. Hit the ignition point. Elena, you can't make that shot. Not in these conditions. I've been making impossible shots for 6 years, Captain. One more won't kill me. It might. Then I die doing something that matters. Her voice hardened. Now shut up and let me work. The radio went silent. Thornton held his breath. 800 meters. 15-knot crosswind. Blizzard conditions. A target no larger than a dinner plate. And Elena Navarro's last bullet. The shot seemed to split the night in half. From the helicopter, now 3 kilometers north and climbing, Thornton saw the first BTR shudder, then a spark, then a fireball that engulfed the vehicle completely, its fuel tank cooking off in a secondary explosion that showered the surrounding infantry with burning debris. The other 2 vehicles slammed to a halt. Soldiers scattered. Fire spread to the dry brush along the mountain road. And in the chaos, the path to the helicopter's extraction route became impassable. Target destroyed. Elena's voice was quiet now, tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. Road is blocked. They'll need 20 minutes to find an alternative route. By then, you'll be back at the FOB. Elena, my ammunition count is 0. I'm moving to secondary position. Deep terrain. They'll follow, but they won't catch me. A pause. I know these mountains better than they know their own names. This isn't my first disappearing act. You can't keep doing this forever. I don't need forever. I just need long enough. Her voice softened one final time. Tell your soldiers they fought well. Captain, tell them I was proud to cover them. And tell command. Tell them Echo 7 is still listening. Every frequency, every pattern, every soldier they decide to sacrifice. The radio crackled. I'll find them. I always do. Elena, wait. Morrison has my file location. Unofficial. Off network. Everything I've documented about command's patterns. The sacrifice units. The buried testimonies. The erased soldiers. Make sure someone sees it. Make sure someone remembers. I will. Good. A long pause. Wind. Static. The last sound of a woman walking into the storm. Goodbye, Captain. Good luck. The radio went dead. Thornton tried to raise her again. Once. Twice. 10 times in the next hour as the helicopter cleared hostile territory and turned toward the FOB's lights. Echo 7 never answered. The debrief began 6 hours after extraction. Thornton stood in a gray conference room before 3 officers he didn't recognize. 2 colonels and a brigadier general, all of them carrying the careful expressions of men who already knew what they wanted to hear. Captain Thornton, your after-action report mentions assistance from an unidentified friendly asset. A sniper operating on a decommissioned frequency. Call sign Echo 7. The brigadier general consulted his notes. Can you elaborate on this contact? Yes, sir. Sergeant Elena Navarro, 3rd Recon Battalion. Officially declared Kia during the Kalvik operation 6 years ago. She's been operating alone in hostile territory ever since, monitoring command frequencies and intervening when she identifies. Thornton paused, choosing his words carefully. When she identifies compromise extraction orders. Compromise extraction orders. Yes, sir. She warned us that Rally Point Zulu was a kill zone. She said the same pattern was used at Kalvik. Official extraction to an exposed position, followed by delayed response allowing enemy forces to close the trap. The 3 officers exchanged glances. Captain, Rally Point Zulu was secured by QRF elements approximately 4 hours after your unauthorized extraction. No enemy forces were encountered in the area. Thornton stared at them. Sir, with respect, the enemy convoy that pursued us to the alternate, LZ, contained over 40 soldiers and 3 armored vehicles. They knew our position, our movement patterns, and our extraction window. Someone fed them that intelligence. Your report also mentions thermal imagery, suggesting 19 survivors from your company's original strength of... The colonel checked his papers. 56 soldiers. Can you explain the discrepancy? The east flank was overrun in the initial ambush. 37 soldiers killed in action before any defensive response was possible. The enemy had our exact coordinates. Sir, they knew where our ammunition depot was located. They knew our communication frequencies. That kind of intelligence doesn't come from battlefield observation. Silence. The brigadier general leaned forward. Captain Thornton, you've had a traumatic experience. Your company suffered catastrophic losses. Your commanding officer was critically wounded. And you made a series of decisions under extreme stress that, fortunately, resulted in the survival of 19 soldiers. That's commendable. Heroic, even. He paused. But the existence of a phantom sniper operating on decommissioned frequencies, a soldier officially killed in action 6 years ago, is not something this inquiry can substantiate. We have no evidence of Sergeant Navarro's survival. We have no evidence of compromised extraction orders. We have no evidence of intelligence leaks within command structure. I have evidence. Thornton's voice hardened. Morrison has a file location. Everything Navro documented over the last 6 years, the patterns, the sacrifice units, the soldiers who were erased. If you access, the file location Sergeant Morrison provided has been analyzed. The colonel's voice was flat. It leads to a defunct server address that hasn't been active in over 3 years. Whatever documents you believe existed there, if they ever existed, are no longer accessible. Thornton felt the ground shift beneath him. You erased it. Captain, you erased it. The same way you erased her after Calvic. The same way you'll erase everything that happened tonight. He stood, his chair scraping against the floor. You're going to classify my testimony as unreliable. You're going to recommend psychological evaluation. And in 6 months, you're going to make sure no one remembers I ever said her name. The 3 officers stare at him with expressions of practiced concern. Captain Thornton, you're clearly exhausted. The psychological strain of what you experienced. I'm not delusional, sir. I'm not shell-shocked. I'm telling you exactly what happened, and you're refusing to hear it because the truth implicates command structure. Thornton's voice was steady now, calm in a way that surprised even him. Elena Navro saved 19 soldiers tonight. She exposed a compromised extraction order. She sacrificed her ammunition, her position, and possibly her life to get my people home. And you're going to bury that because it's easier than explaining why Calvic happened. This hearing is concluded. The Brigadier General gathered his papers. Captain Thornton, you're being placed on administrative leave pending psychological evaluation. Your testimony regarding Echo 7 will be classified as unreliable wartime reporting. Your soldiers' testimonies will be reviewed individually to determine if they corroborate your claims. He paused at the door. For your sake, Captain, I hope they don't. The door closed. Thornton stood alone in the gray room, listening to hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Elena had told him this would happen. She had predicted every step. The sealed testimony, the psychological evaluations, the systematic erasure of inconvenient truth. She had known because she had lived through it herself. And she had asked him to do one thing anyway. Tell them what happened. Make sure my team didn't die for nothing. 3 months later, the military inquiry into Bravo Company's losses was officially closed. The final report listed 37 soldiers killed in action during an enemy ambush. It attributed the high casualty rate to communication failures during adverse weather conditions. It recommended no changes to extraction protocols. It made no mention of compromised coordinates, intelligence leaks, or sacrificial targeting. Captain James Thornton was cleared for return to duty following his psychological evaluation. His service record noted exemplary performance under extreme stress and recommended promotion consideration. His testimony about Echo 7 was classified and sealed permanently, but Morrison kept a copy. The unofficial file, reconstructed from fragments, interviews with survivors, and pattern analysis conducted during Thornton's administrative leave, painted a different picture. Pages of documented incidents stretching back 6 years. 12 separate units that had experienced catastrophic losses during official extractions. 43 soldiers whose deaths bore the same signature. Precise enemy intelligence, exposed extraction points, delayed QRF response. And in every case, evidence of a phantom sniper operating in the area. Impossible shots. Collapsed ambushes. Survivors who reported contact with a woman on frequencies that no longer existed. Elena Navro hadn't been fighting a war. She had been fighting a pattern. What do we do with this? Morrison asked, standing in Thornton's quarters. The file spread across his desk like evidence at a trial that would never happen. Thornton looked at the pages, at the names, at the photograph clipped to the first page. A younger Elena, still in uniform, still smiling, taken 3 months before Calvic erased her from existence. We wait, he said finally. We document. And when the time comes, when someone with enough authority decides to look closer, we make sure they find what they're looking for. And her? Thornton thought about the voice on the radio. The cold, precise guidance through impossible terrain. The final bullet that had stopped a convoy and bought them their window. She's still out there. You don't know that. I do. He touched the photograph. She told me she knows these mountains better than anyone, She told me this wasn't her first disappearing act. And she told me, he paused, she told me she'll find them. Every soldier command decides to sacrifice. Every unit they send to die, she'll be there. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. That's not a life, Captain. That's a haunting. Maybe that's all she has left. Thornton closed the file. But if we're lucky, if we survive long enough to tell the truth, we might be able to give her something more. The first reports came 6 weeks later. A fire base in the eastern sector, overrun during a night assault. 17 survivors huddled in a shattered communication center with no ammunition and no extraction options. By dawn, the enemy force had been decimated. 36 dead from precision rifle fire. Their attack routes collapsed by prepositioned explosives. Their command element eliminated before they could call for reinforcements. The survivors reported contact with a female voice on an unauthorized frequency. Call sign Echo 7. The second incident occurred 3 days after that. A reconnaissance team pinned down during a patrol gone wrong. 5 soldiers, 2 wounded, enemy forces closing from 3 directions. A sniper engaged from an impossible distance, eliminating 7 hostiles before the team could even identify her position. No official contact was ever established, but the pattern was clear. Thornton began keeping his own file. Every phantom sniper report, every impossible rescue, every instance where soldiers who should have died instead walked home because someone intervened at the last possible moment. Elena Navarro couldn't return from the war. The institution that had created her had also destroyed any path back to normal life. She would never be recognized, never be thanked, never receive the medals and commendations she deserved. But she could make sure no one else suffered what her team did, and that, Thornton realized, had become her mission, her meaning, the only identity she had left after Calvik took everything else. The radio sat on his desk now, modified, capable of accessing the decommissioned frequencies that Command had sealed. He hadn't activated it yet, hadn't needed to, but some nights, when sleep wouldn't come in the way to what he knew pressed down on his chest like a physical burden, he found himself reaching for the dial, 147.325, the ghost channel. And sometimes, in the static, in the silence, in the spaces between transmissions that shouldn't have existed, he thought he heard her, still watching, still listening, still answering the calls that no one else could reach. The final incident came 18 months after Bravo Company's extraction, a forward operating base in the northern mountains, besieged for 48 hours, ammunition exhausted, casualties mounting, every official extraction route compromised by enemy positions that seemed to know their movements before they made them. The base commander, a major who had served with Thornton years ago, made a desperate call on a frequency he had only heard rumors about, 147.325. Static, then a voice. Who needs me? The major's hand trembled around the radio. Echo 7. This is Watchdog Actual. Position overrun. 32 survivors. No extraction options. We were told this frequency was dead. We were told. You were told a lot of things. The voice was female. Calm, cold as the winter wind that never seemed to stop blowing in these mountains. Command has been lying to soldiers for a long time, but I'm not Command, and I'm not dead. Can you help us? A pause. Long enough to worry him. I'm already here. The siege broke 60 seconds later. From somewhere in the darkness beyond the wire, a precision rifle began its work. 1 shot, 2, 3, each report followed by the collapse of an enemy position, the destruction of a heavy weapons emplacement, the silencing of a mortar team that had been hammering the base for hours. The enemy assault faltered, then collapsed, then dissolved into chaos as soldiers who had been preparing for a final push suddenly found themselves hunted by something they couldn't see. By dawn, the perimeter was clear. The extraction helicopter arrived without incident, and in the communication logs, alongside the desperate calls for help and the frantic sit-reps that had marked the siege's darkest hours, there was a single transmission that had never been officially authorized. Watchdog Actual, your extraction window is clear. Good luck getting home. Echo 7 out. No one ever identified the sniper's position, No one ever found evidence of her presence. But 32 soldiers walked off that base alive, and every one of them would spend the rest of their lives telling the story of the voice on the dead frequency, the woman who answered when no one else could, the ghost who refused to let them die. Morrison found Thornton in the communications center 3 days later, surrounded by reports and incident files, his eyes red from lack of sleep. "You've been tracking her." It wasn't a question. Thornton nodded slowly. 18 months. 47 separate incidents. Over 200 soldiers alive because she was in the right place at the right time. He spread the files across the table. She's everywhere, Morrison. Mountain positions, valley outposts, forward bases, and sectors we didn't even know she had access to. It's like she's built an entire network, observation posts, supply caches, communication relays, all running on equipment that officially doesn't exist anymore. How is that possible? She's one person. Is she? Thornton pulled out a map marked with red pins, each one representing a confirmed phantom sniper incident. Look at the distribution. These shots aren't coming from a single position. They're happening simultaneously across multiple sectors. Either she's the fastest sniper in history, or she's trained others. Morrison's eyes widened. Soldiers she saved. Units she's extracted. She's recruiting them. Not recruiting, teaching. Thornton thought about Elena's voice on the radio, the clinical precision, the systematic methodology. She's creating a network of guardians, soldiers who know the patterns, who understand what command is willing to sacrifice, who can be in positions that official doctrine would never authorize. That's insane. Morrison stopped. That's exactly what she would do. She couldn't go home. She couldn't be rehabilitated. Command made sure of that when they erased her. Thornton's voice was quiet, but she could make sure her knowledge didn't die with her. She could train others to see what she sees, to do what she does, to answer the calls that no one else can reach. The implications settled over them like a weight. Somewhere out there, in the frozen mountains, in the abandoned outposts, in the spaces between official operations and military doctrine, a shadow army was forming, not answering to command, not following official protocols. Just soldiers protecting other soldiers from an institution that had proven willing to sacrifice its own. And at the center of it all, invisible and immortal, was Elena Navarro, the ghost who refused to stay dead. "What do we do?" Morrison asked. Thornton looked at the radio on his desk. The dial was still set to 147.325. "We wait," he said. "We watch. And when she needs us, when she finally asks for something instead of just giving, we answer." "You think she will?" "No." Thornton's voice carried something like acceptance. "I think she's going to do this until there's nothing left of her. Until the war takes everything she has. Until she's given every last bullet, every last breath, every last piece of herself to soldiers who never asked for her help. And then someone else picks up the radio." He touched the dial gently. Someone else answers the call. The legend continues. Morrison was quiet for a long time. "She'd hate that," he said finally. "She'd hate being turned into a myth." "Maybe." Thornton smiled, a small, sad expression that held no humor. "But she became one anyway. Not because she wanted it. Because soldiers needed something to believe in. Something that said no one gets left behind, even when command disagrees. Something that proved the system doesn't always win." He picked up the radio. "Echo 7. This is Bravo Actual. Checking in. If you're monitoring, if you're still out there, we haven't forgotten. We're still telling the story. We're still making sure your team didn't die for nothing." Static. Then silence. Then, so faint he almost missed it, a single word carried to the snow and the wind and the impossible distance between them. "Good." The transmission ended. Thornton set down the radio, his heart beating hard in his chest. She was still out there, still fighting, still answering. And somewhere in the frozen mountains, in positions no one would ever find, watching over soldiers who would never know her name, Elena Navarro continued her eternal vigil. Not a weapon of the state, not a tool of command, just a woman who had lost everything except her purpose. And her purpose was them, all of them. Every soldier abandoned by a system that considered them expendable. Every unit sent to die for someone else's failure. Every desperate voice on a frequency that shouldn't exist. She would be there. She would always be there. because someone had to. The snow never stopped falling in those mountains. Soldiers came and went, rotations changing, faces blurring together, the endless cycle of war grinding forward like machinery that no longer remembered its original purpose. Some of them heard the stories. Some of them dismissed them as battlefield legend, the kind of myth that soldiers create to convince themselves that something watches over them in the dark. But some of them believed. And when the worst happened, when the ambush closed too fast, when extraction failed, when the bullets ran out and the enemy was closing and there was nothing left but darkness, some of them reached for their radios. Some of them remembered the old frequency. And some of them, in their final desperate moments, heard a voice that shouldn't have existed. Who needs me? The answer was always the same. Everyone needs you. And Elena Navarro, phantom sniper, abandoned soldier, guardian of the forgotten, would emerge in the storm one more time. Because that was who she was now. Not the woman who died at Kalvik. Not the victim of command's betrayal. Not the ghost who should have stayed buried. Just Echo 7. Still listening. Still fighting. Still answering the calls that no one else could reach. And as long as soldiers needed her, as long as command continued to sacrifice its own, as long as the system valued convenience over lives, as long as there were desperate voices calling out for help into frequencies that no longer existed, she would be there, invisible, eternal, unbreakable. The final entry in Thornton's file read, Subject continues to operate outside official parameters. Location unknown. Command status unchanged. Officially Kia, functionally immortal. Network of associated operatives, expanding across multiple sectors. Pattern recognition suggests institutional corruption awareness is increasing among surviving personnel. Beneath that, in handwriting, he had added himself. She cannot be found. She cannot be stopped. She cannot be brought home. And then the last words. But she can make sure no one else gets left behind. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's the only thing that ever mattered. The war continued. Seasons changed. Commanders rotated. The snow fell and melted and fell again, burying the evidence of battles that official records would never acknowledge. But the phantom sniper incidents never stopped. 3 years after Bravo Company's extraction, the unofficial count had reached 112 confirmed engagements. 347 soldiers saved through unexplained intervention. 19 separate investigations launched and subsequently buried. And in every case, the same signature. Precision fire from impossible distances, executed with equipment that shouldn't exist, coordinated through frequencies that had been decommissioned years ago. Elena Navarro had become something larger than herself. The soldiers she saved became her network. The soldiers they saved became her legacy. The stories they told became her mythology. And slowly, invisibly, the shadow army she had built began to change the shape of the war itself. Not by fighting the enemy, by fighting the system. Command corruption faced exposure it couldn't suppress. Sacrificial targeting patterns were documented and leaked. Officers who ordered soldiers into kill zones found their careers mysteriously derailed by evidence that appeared from nowhere. The institution that had tried to erase Elena Navarro discovered that it had only made her stronger, because she wasn't one person anymore. She was an idea. She was a promise. She was the answer to a question that every abandoned soldier had asked themselves in their darkest moments. Does anyone care if I die here? And the answer, echoing through frozen mountains and desolate valleys and forgotten outposts across 1,000 kilometers of hostile territory, was always the same. Yes, someone cares. Someone is watching. Someone will come for you. Thornton received his final communication from Elena 5 years after Bravo Company's extraction. He was a colonel by then, one of the few officers who had survived with his conscience intact, known quietly among junior soldiers as the man who believed the ghost. His career had stalled, unofficially blacklisted by commanders who suspected his sympathies but couldn't prove them. He didn't care. The radio on his desk crackled at 0300. Bravo Actual, this is Echo 7. Thornton sat up instantly, reaching for the transmitter with hands that hadn't lost their steadiness despite everything. Echo 7, I read you. Go ahead. A pause. Longer than usual. I'm passing command, Captain. The network is established. The protocols are in place. There are soldiers out there now who can do what I do, see the patterns, reach the abandoned, break the sieges. Another pause. It's time for me to become someone else. What do you mean? I mean I've been Echo 7 for too long. The legend is bigger than the woman now. That's good. That's how it should be. But legends don't get tired. Legends don't feel the cold in their joints or the weight of every shot they couldn't take in time. Her voice carried something he had never heard before, not defeat, but acceptance. I've done what I could, Captain. I've saved who I could save. Now it's someone else's turn. Elena, don't. The word was gentle but final. Don't ask me to stay. Don't ask me to keep fighting. I've been at war for 11 years. I've held the line while everyone else got to go home. And now, she stopped, breathed, continued. Now I'm going to find out if there's anything left of me that doesn't belong to this war. Thornton's eyes burned. Where will you go? Somewhere warm. Somewhere the snow doesn't fall. Somewhere no one knows the name Elena Navarro. A hint of humor crept into her voice, the first he had ever heard from her. Maybe I'll finally learn to sleep through the night. Will I hear from you again? Silence. Long enough that he thought the connection had died. Then, you'll hear from Echo 7. The call sign doesn't die with me. The network will keep it alive. But Elena, she paused. Elena is going to try being a person again. She's going to try being someone who doesn't calculate sniper angles in her sleep or map defensive positions when she walks through a grocery store. She's going to try. I hope you find it. His voice was rough. Whatever you're looking for. Whatever peace looks like for someone who's been through what you've been through. I hope you find it. Me too. A last pause. Goodbye, Captain. Thank you for believing me. Thank you for telling the story. Thank you for... She stopped. Thank you for answering when I called. Not many people would have. I had to. No, you chose to. That's different. That's everything. The transmission began to fade. Take care of my soldiers, Captain. They're your soldiers now, too. I will. Good. Static. Then silence. Thornton sat alone in his quarters for a long time, listening to the empty frequency. The snow was falling outside his window. The same snow that fell everywhere in this forsaken theater. The snow that covered everything eventually. The snow that Elena Navarro had fought through for 11 years. He wondered if she was watching it fall right now. He wondered if she felt relief or loss or something in between. He wondered if she would ever truly stop being Echo 7. Or that identity had become so integral to her survival that abandoning it would be like cutting out her own heart. But those weren't questions he could answer. Those weren't battles he could fight for her. All he could do was what she had asked. Tell the story. Protect the soldiers. Keep the network alive. And hope, somewhere in the back of his mind, in the space where Faye survived despite everything, that Elena Navarro found what she was looking for. That somewhere warm, somewhere the snow didn't fall, a woman with cold eyes and steady hands finally learned to put down her rifle. Finally learned to rest. Finally learned what it meant to be a person instead of a weapon. He didn't believe it would happen. He knew her too well for that. But he hoped anyway. Because hope was all any of them had left. The network continued without her. Call sign Echo 7 passed between operators like a sacred trust. Each one trained by the predecessor. Each one committed to the same mission. Each one carrying Elena's legacy forward into new generations of abandoned soldiers and corrupted commands. The Phantom Sniper became a legend that transcended any individual. Soldiers whispered about her around campfires in forward operating bases. Junior officers studied her tactics in unofficial training sessions that would never appear on any curriculum. Intelligence analysts tracked her operations without ever acknowledging her existence. And somewhere in classified files and off-network communications and the quiet conversations of men and women who had been saved by impossible fire from impossible distances, Elena Navarro remained alive, not as a person, as an idea, as proof that the system could be beaten, that soldiers could be protected by other soldiers, that no one had to die alone. 10 years after Bravo Company's extraction, Thornton, now a general, his hair gray, his body bearing the accumulated damage of 3 decades of service, received a package at his quarters. No return address, no postmark, just a small box wrapped in plain brown paper. Inside was a single item, a spent rifle cartridge, its brass casing tarnished by age and weather. And beneath it, a photograph. Elena Navarro, standing on a beach somewhere tropical, her face turned toward a sunset that painted the sky in colors that had nothing to do with war. She was smiling. On the back of the photograph, in handwriting he recognized from years of studying her field reports, 3 words. I found it. Thornton held the photograph for a long time. The sun was setting outside his window, too. Different colors, different climate, but the same light that touched everything equally. She had made it. Against all odds, against every prediction he had made about her inability to leave the war behind. Elena Navarro had found something worth living for. He didn't know what it was. He didn't need to know. The photograph was enough. The smile was enough. The knowledge that somewhere, finally, impossibly, miraculously, the woman who had saved hundreds of soldiers had saved herself. He placed the photograph in the same file where he kept his unofficial documentation of Echo 7's operations. The file that would never be declassified. The file that would be buried when he died. Its contents passed to someone who would understand. But he kept a cartridge on his desk. A reminder. A talisman. A piece of evidence that proved the ghost was real. And sometimes when the nights were long and the way of command pressed down on him, and he wondered if any of it mattered, the fighting, the lying, the endless war that consumed everything it touched, he would pick up that cartridge and remember. Remember the voice on the dead frequency. Remember the impossible shots through the blizzard. Remember the woman who had refused to let him die. And he would find the strength to keep going. One more day. One more battle. One more soldier saved. For Elena. For Echo 7. For everyone who had ever been abandoned by an institution that considered them expendable. The legend continued. 20 years after Bravo Company's extraction, the military archives released a partial declassification of documents related to the Kalvik operation. The official report was unchanged. Friendly fire incident, communication error, tragic loss of life. But attached to the file, unauthorized, inserted by someone with access that shouldn't have existed, was a single addendum. Sergeant Elena Navarro survived the Kalvik artillery strike. She held her position for 18 hours, engaging 47 enemy combatants, before extraction became impossible. When official channels declared her killed in action, she chose to disappear rather than face the psychiatric attention that awaited whistleblowers who challenged command decisions. For the next 11 years, operating under the call sign Echo 7, Sergeant Navarro conducted independent overwatch operations across the Eastern Theater. Conservative estimates attribute over 300 soldier survivals to her direct intervention. She trained approximately 24 operators to continue her mission, creating a network that persists to this day. Sergeant Navarro's current location is unknown. She is believed to have left the theater of operations approximately 15 years ago. No evidence of her death has been discovered. The official classification of Sergeant Navarro as Kia remains unchanged per command directive. This addendum is unofficial and unauthorized, but the truth survives. She answered when no one else could. She saved us. That is the only record that matters. The document bore no signature, but Thornton, reviewing the declassification from his retirement home, his hands shaking with age and something that might have been joy, recognized the writing. Morrison, the sergeant who had carried Henderson through the snow, the man who had kept the file, the soldier who had never forgotten. He had found a way to slip the truth into the official record. Not enough to change anything. Not enough to exonerate Elena or hold command accountable or undo the damage that had been done, but enough to make sure that somewhere, in the dusty archives of an institution that had tried to erase her, Elena Navarro's story survived. Enough to make sure that someone, someday, would read those words and understand. A woman answered when no one else could. She saved them. That is the only record that matters. Thornton died 3 years later. His service record listed 42 years of honorable duty, 3 theater commendations, and an administrative legacy that had quietly protected hundreds of soldiers from the institutional callousness he had spent his career fighting. His obituary mentioned none of this. But at his funeral, attended by soldiers spanning 4 generations, many of whom had never met him personally, a woman in civilian clothes stood at the back of the crowd. She was older now, gray in her hair, lines on her face that mapped decades of experiences no one would ever fully understand. But her eyes were the same. Calm, cold, calculating. The eyes of someone who saw patterns others missed. The eyes of someone who had spent 11 years answering calls that no one else could reach. Elena Navarro watched them lower James Thornton into the ground, and she felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Grief, not the operational grief of losing an asset, not the professional grief of watching a colleague fall. Real grief, the grief of losing someone who believed her when believing was impossible. The grief of losing someone who had kept his promise. She didn't stay for the reception. She didn't introduce herself to the soldiers who gathered afterward, trading stories about the general who had always seemed to know more than he should about phantom sniper operations. She simply turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd the way she had always disappeared, invisible, silent, leaving nothing behind except the faintest impression that someone had been there, someone important, someone who mattered. But before she left, she stopped at the grave, placed a single item on the freshly turned earth, a spent rifle cartridge, tarnished with age, identical to the one she had sent him years ago, and beneath it a note. Thank you for answering when I called. Thank you for telling the story. Thank you for believing. Rest now. I'll take it from here. Echo 7. She walked into the sunset, not toward war, not toward another mission, just forward, into whatever came next, into whatever life remained for a woman who had given everything to soldiers who would never know her name. And somewhere behind her, in the growing darkness, a new generation of operators prepared to continue her work. Call sign Echo 7 would never die. The network would endure. The phantom sniper would appear wherever soldiers were abandoned, wherever commands sacrificed their own, wherever the system failed the people it was supposed to protect. Not one person, not one legend, an idea that had become immortal, a promise that would never be broken. Elena Navarro's story shows us that duty doesn't always mean obedience. Sometimes it means protecting the people your own institution has abandoned. If this kept you engaged, hit that like button. Tell me in the comments, would you answer the call from people who erased you or walk away? Subscribe if you haven't already. More stories like this are coming. See you in the next one. The snow still falls in those mountains. Soldiers still deploy to theaters where the enemy knows their positions before they do. Commands still make decisions that prioritize convenience over lives. But somewhere out there, in frequencies that don't exist, in positions that official doctrine can't explain, in the spaces between what is authorized and what is necessary, someone is always watching. Someone is always listening. Someone is always ready to answer. Because Elena Navarro taught them how. Because the soldiers she saved passed on her knowledge. Because the legend outlived the woman. And when the worst happens, when the ambush closes, when the extraction fails, when there's nothing left but darkness and fear and the absolute certainty that no one is coming, some soldier will reach for their radio. Some soldier will remember the old frequency. Some soldier will make a desperate call into the void. And somewhere in the static, somewhere in the silence, somewhere in the impossible space between abandonment and salvation, a voice will answer, calm, cold, steady as the rifle that never missed. Who needs me? The answer is always the same. Everyone needs you. And she, or whoever carries a call sign now, will answer, because that's what Echo 7 does. That's what Echo 7 has always done. From the frozen trenches of Bravo Company's extraction to the beaches where an old woman finally learned to smile, the mission has never changed. No one gets left behind. No one dies alone. No one is forgotten. Not while Echo 7 is listening. Not while the network survives. Not while soldiers remember the woman who refused to let them die. Elena Navarro couldn't return from the war, so she became something the war could never destroy. An answer, a promise, a legend, still watching, still fighting, still there, always.